Welcome. Ordinarily, human beings relate to their being, their situation, their experience in terms of interpretation of what the patterns that experience presents itself as seem to be. And they identify theories about what they are, what their situation is, what their environment is, what the sorts of the way the energies patterns seem to interact, and try to work with these patternings in ways that they imagine will be advantageous. Which is all very well and good. It leads to normal human functioning that we're all very familiar with. There's one problem, though, which is that what experience actually consists of is generally not accurately included within the people's interpretations of what the patterns that present themselves as within their experience and as their experience seems to be. So as a result, there will be an inaccuracy in the way that they relate to their patterns, or what they think the patterns are, that will tend to grow over time. Rather like having a theory of a calendar. If you think the day is 23 hours and 59 minutes long, after a little while it's going to be noon in the middle of the night. So this sort of, it's a principle you might call the inherent reality check. The nature of reality intrudes itself sooner or later, continually, in fact, at a certain point where it becomes obvious that our interpretations have not been clear enough, have not been accurate enough. Buddha called this the inherent frustration of existence, that no matter what you try and get, you're never going to get exactly what you want, and when you try and hang on to it, you're not going to be able to hang on to it as you may hope. And what you don't want is going to have a tendency to show up anyway. And he, of course, cited the famous sickness, old age, and death. He might have thrown in taxes if he'd lived in a civilized culture. Little irony there. Oh, sorry. Anyway, but in yoga, it is possible to explore what experience is directly outside of the context of what the patterns are interpreted as being, and getting caught up in relating to all of this interpretation of what the patterns seem to be. What are the patterns made of? How are they showing up? What is this energy itself, rather than the patterns that the energy seems to show up in? What is the energy of experience? And this yields an entirely different orientation of what one is, what one's situation is, and what the implications of that are. And this orientation, very fortunately, turns out to be wonderful, because what this actuality that is here turns out to be is very wonderful, especially from a point of view of human limitation. So in short, discovering what this is provides a revelation on what you are, what your situation is, what the implications of that are in terms of achievement, satisfaction, fulfillment, completion, and ultimately um, transcendence that is absolutely wonderful. And this happens to be actually the case, and it is discoverable simply by looking at what experience is, rather than oriented to it in terms of what the patterns seem to be. I seem to be a little droopy tonight. I apologize for that. It's stricken my mana, I assure you. The nature of the patterns, the nature of interpreting the patterns that show up in experience is such that it is very seductive to do so. And even though the patterns do present, and even though reality is presenting these patterns, still and all, getting obsessed with these patterns tends to create a sort of a feedback network of obsession and distraction, where instead of, even though in actual fact you are, of course, completely and always 100% engaged with actuality, because what else could you be engaged with? What else could be present? What would it be made of if it wasn't actual? But because obsession with these patterns can become so distracting, what happens is essentially one spins off into fantasy, even while one is in fact immersed in nothing other than actuality. And this spinning off into fantasy can distract one from the actuality, and hence cut one off from appreciating and taking advantage of and the inherent and wonderful implications of what this actually turns out to be. And then the erroneous implications of one's interpretation of the patterns may be dominant, and that may be all one is obsessed with, which can create all sorts of feelings of inadequacy, partiality, separation, frustration, and suffering, and so on and so forth. I better quit while I'm not too far behind.
I'm going to dig yourself deep.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I will redeem my presentation in discussion. Michael.
Peter, you said something a few weeks ago that really was so powerful that I've been contemplating it a lot. And that is, every interaction when two people meet and interact or whatever way, talking or even just being together, a lot more going on than on the surface. It's an energetic interaction.
Yes.
And that's actually, it's very subtle and very profound.
Yes, certainly. And not just people. Experience is literally infinite dimensional, so that any and all participation with experience, which of course is nothing other than, it is infinitely multidimensional in terms of its meaningfulness, its implication, the qualities and quantities of information and intelligence and meaningfulness that are presented. And of course, this is very experienceable between two people, because there is, even modern material philosophy includes body language and the nuance of communication, the nuance of the way things are phrased and so on and so forth. But it's very, very easy to experience psychic flavors and all sorts of nuance, of meaningfulness, of informational value, just non-linearly and open-endedly. And in actual fact, the more open you become to what your experience actually is, the more you'll discover that sensory experience is small, is tiny. That's not literally true because it actually has no dimension at all. But relatively speaking, then in terms of the way, let's say, consensus reality thinks of it, sensory experience is very, very small, and the realms of subtle, call it subtle energy engagement, are vast and multidimensional.
It's almost like a sense impression is the front for a whole labyrinth beyond that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to think of it, but you don't need to model it because you have the actuality.
Right.
So the trick, of course, is to become aware of that.
The Mahamudra means, I brought this up before, the great gesture, and Shupa described that as, or defined that as, the entire gesture of themselves.
Mm.
Each moment is a display of its own intrinsic nature.
Yeah, which is infinite and open-ended and transcendental inherently. I mean, this is the amazing fact. One discovers that what this actually consists of is literally infinite. It's obviously and palpably infinite. It's not infinite in some theoretical sense of some abstract philosophy. It is literally infinite and open-ended. And this is very directly experienceable. Everyone experiences it all the time because there's nothing else to experience. But we become experts at ignoring that. It's sort of self-censoring our experience and limiting it down to, very small seeming content automatically. So we seem able to not notice the open-endedness.
In terms of the teachings which are very common in the East, Hindu and Buddhist teachings say, it sounds very linear, but maybe there's more to it. You experience something negative when somebody attacks you, either verbally or physically, or some unfortunate situation happened. And traditionally, I know for a fact in Buddhism, I don't know so much about the Hindu take on it, but that's one's negative karma ripening, and therefore, if you generate anger under the strain of that situation, creating more karma.
Yeah, a lot of that kind of interpretation is a little overly simplistic. In fact, a lot overly simplistic. In actual fact, your experience is nothing other than your karma. So what you experience is your own energy. And very much in the way when you dream at night, all you're experiencing is your own energy.
Sure.
Even if you're dreaming and there seems to be a central content of the dream where you're interacting with somebody or some event seems to be happening, but there might seem to be a background or a tree or a house you happen to glance at or something like that. Those things they don't just happen to be there. They aren't in the background. Of course, they're being put there very intentionally as an expression of the meaningfulness of your energy, of the dreamer's nature. And likewise, waking consciousness, waking experience is exactly the same thing. So every single thing that you experience is your own energy. But when you see it in terms of events of this and that and separation and this is you and we're having an interaction and it's positive or negative or all these qualifications, you're relating to the karma in terms of the patterning, which is what I started talking about, which is a distraction into inaccuracy, a distraction away from the actuality. Whereas when you relate to it, the karmic pattern as it is, as a field of infinite energies, which are you, then it's a very different story.
Well, when you say it's your own energy, it's your own interpretation, your own...
No, it's literally your own energy. Everything you see is you, substantially. This is your body. Your field of experience is your embodiment.
The way you were describing it earlier, a moment ago, likening it to the dream state, I understood saying that the waking state is seen not as it is, but as it's interpreted in the same way that the dream...
Yeah. Exactly so. And when you see a dream is a dreaming, it's a vastly different perspective than when you think you're literally there and it's objectively true and you're involved in this situation and there's various outcomes that might occur that might be positive or negative and so on and so forth, which is the normal experience of being lost in a dream. But with some degree of lucidity, when you have some intuition, wait a minute, this is a dream. It may look exactly the same in terms of how it's presenting itself, but obviously the implication is vastly different, completely different. And waking life is no different whatsoever.
The way that the mind interprets and then responds to those interpretations, it's like a labyrinth or increasing web.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It feeds on itself.
That's right.
It reifies itself, and it seduces one's attention into it. The essential principle is one of distraction. One is distracted by all these interpretations of these patterns, and the distraction feeds on itself and becomes even more distracting, and so on and so forth. It's like being lost in a TV show or something. Whereas in actual fact, when you're watching TV, all you're seeing is patterns of light on a screen. And likewise, here, all that is present is, well, we don't have language for it. I coined the term, I call it radiant presence, which is this actual energy that all of this is made of. This is something. What's presenting itself, this field of experience is actual. It's real, right? I mean, it's here. What it is that is here is what? It's experience. Well, what is experience made of? How's it work? What's it presenting? And that's all that is present, is what it's made of. What it seems to be in terms of the shapes it seems to have and the dynamism of the various sub-patterns that seem to be appearing and all that is just accidental. But the real interesting fact is, what is this energy that's shining forth here, that's presenting itself? And this is, and obviously it has no name. I'm calling it radiant presence is completely arbitrary, but it's meaningful to do so. But the point is not designating it one way or the other. The point is becoming directly aware of it as such, becoming directly aware of it, that it is, in the way that it is. And then you become aware of experience as experience, not experience as worlds and people and bodies and events and time and space, but just, all of those are implications, all those are interpretations. They're theoretical overlays, conceptual overlays, interpretations, theories about what this may be going on here. Very much like when you watch TV, all you're seeing is patterns of light flickering on a flat screen, right? And the mind effortlessly generates an overlay of interpretation that, maybe these shapes represent people, maybe these shapes represent environments that these people are in, maybe these people are interacting in this environment, and so on. There's nothing like that there. All that there is flickering lights on a flat screen. And yet, this overlay presents itself, and one can easily get distracted by getting completely invested in it. Exactly analogously, there's something present here, which if it was a TV show, would be equivalent to patterns of light on a screen. And all of the environments, the people, the events, the science, the cause and effect, and all of that are overlays, conceptual overlays, being essentially imposed in imagination by mind on this actuality. Very much, causality, for example. I mean, in a TV show, you see the good guy and the bad guy are punching each other, and the good guy lays a haymaker, and the bad guy goes flying. The bad guy didn't go flying because the good guy hit him. He went flying because that's what the pattern of light did. There was no flying, just a pattern of light moving this way and that way. And likewise, we have all these very elaborate interpretations of cause and effect that we suppose are happening in this world. And it's completely arbitrary, because what there actually is patterns of energy. What is this energy? What is the energy that experience is made of? And if one can become sensitive to this energy as it actually is in itself, it's a a startling discovery, because the nature of this energy is drastically and wildly beyond any of the natures that we suppose our interpretations of it to be like.
So, is the orientation to this, so to speak, super subjectivity? Like I'm the subject, whatever that means.
Well, it's no more super than
it's
any subjectivity.
That I'm the center, and it's all happening within a subjective sense. It's not out there.
In a sense, but it's not is that simple. Yeah, you are the subject, but you are also the object. So in a sense, you can collapse it all. You can say it's all you, but you can also say you're all it. So neither one, there's not really a you and there's not really an it, there's just a this. And, well, yeah, are you this? Yeah, sure you are. But is everything this? Yeah, sure it is. Is the universe this? Yeah, sure it is. So it's not like it collapses down to you or it collapses down to the universe or something. It is one thing. And certainly you are that, but it's not that you are that, it's the idea that there is a you is entirely erroneous. It doesn't cancel the you that you're familiar with, it's just the you that you're familiar with is a misinterpretation of this actuality, which includes what you think of as your you-ness, but it's not actually based in a you, it's this. The nature of this presents as you-ness, as thisness, as thatness, and yet it is just this. So, subjectively it can seem like it collapses down to subjectivity, because you can seem like, well, gosh, this is all me. Boy, that's weird. And you think, you think, oh my God, I'm going nuts. How could this all be me? But it's, in a way, it is. But it's not that it, like I said, it's not that it collapses down. All the sort of nuances that you are familiar with experiencing actually exist. It's the interpretations of them that are erroneous. So a sense of you exists. A sense of consciousness exists. A sense of perception exists. A sense of that which is perceived exists. A sense of all this patterning and interaction exists. But having said that, you can't really say anything more than that. And it's a real mistake to then make the leap, which we ordinarily do in sort of consensus reality ways of looking at this, of falling into, well, yeah, but I'm here and the world's there and there's interaction, there's causality and there's time and space and there's beginnings and ends and there's, all of that is an over-elaboration which is just not warranted.
Peter, I'm sorry. Do you have your hand up?
I'll take that with you.
Yeah, Peter, so I follow that and I really resonate with it. So to take an example, if you have a trinity, let's say, of object seeing, seer, and seeing, the activity of seeing.
Right.
Oftentimes it seems to me that only seeing is real. Seer is inferred, and as you point out, probably entirely maybe non-existent, just mental construct of me as a independent, long-lasting entity. And the objects too are sort of not usually what they appear to be. They're kind of patterns of energy, and we take them to be solid and unchangeable, and have certain ideas about them. So, if you take that trinity, seer, seeing, and seeing, it seems to me that the only actuality is seeing, verbing. Sort of. Does that make any sense?
In a way, but that's a little oversimplified, because you don't actually cancel out the seer, or you don't actually cancel out the seen. It's more like saying there's seer, seeing, and the seen, except there's not three separate things.
Right.
It's a continuum that is one thing. And it is not true that it is a seer. It's not true that it is a seeing. It's not true that it's a seeing. It's something else entirely. That is because even that much is over analysis. It's just present. It's miraculous presence. The idea that there is any mechanism whatsoever is too much. Even a seeing. This seeing, I mean, even as a verb is too much. It's weirder than that. It just is. It's like, let there be light. Is let there be light a seeing? Well, sure. I mean, seeing is it, but it doesn't collapse down to being a seeing in any simple sense. The important thing is not to be able to put it various ways, but feel, engage with the actuality, just this that is here, just be with it on that level.
Yeah, seeing is, you're right, it's kind of too specific, and it's limiting, but perhaps awareness, or essentially, it's like you said, it's nameable. You cannot put a name on it.
Yeah.
It's nature, presence, activity, beingness, whatever. But I guess I was still referring to that basically seeing as a word, it makes it too specific, but it's that isness, if you will, that presence, that awareness that is, and everything else is not that it's not, but it's not what we take it to be. Like this persona that I believe is me, as I look for it, I don't find anything, just patterns of habit, mental constructs, various kinds of conditioning, and there is really nothing of substance, nothing that is not constantly mutating and changing.
Right.
Me that was 5 years ago is different.
Nothing whatsoever is what you take it to be.
Right.
And including being.
Right.
Being is not what you take it to be. Nothing whatsoever is what you take it to be. And yet it is. It is actual. And the trick is to be with that actuality as it is. And of course you are with that actuality as it is, which makes it possible. But it's completely irrational and completely non-linear and beyond description.
Yeah, it's what you were saying earlier, that you sort of that we tend to read patterns and give them meaning and give them some kind of permanence or validity, when in fact it's just forever changing. Anything that you can say about it is just not accurate, to say the least. It is.
Michael, you still have...
Oh yeah, many.
You've got a cue.
So the Madhyamaka teachings, of course, state that the whole thing is based upon grasping at phenomena both inner, aggregate, as something solid and existing as static and ultimately existent self, and then other apparent objects existing as inherently there. And then they have a methodology of systematically examining things, like the chariot, and you can find a chariot in its parts or as a whole and so forth. So that type of analytical process, and what you're communicating in Dzogchen, not so much part of it, right?
No. Negation can be useful for disproving and for invalidating assumptions, but ultimately what this is a sublime, is an absolute positivity. So negation can negate your, you can say, no, it's not like that, it's not like this, it's not like that, it's not like this. But the important thing is not what it's not like, the important thing is what it is. And you don't actually need to negate anything to go to the positivity, and the positivity does all that for you because it constitutes everything. It constitutes the grasping. It constitutes the interpreting. It constitutes delusion. So all these conditions are not, in the light of this actuality, this positivity, all these conditions turn out not to be problems at all. So you don't need to have dismantled them. You don't need to have disproved them. Just bypass them altogether. Go to this actuality, which is completely positive, completely itself. But it's transcendental, so you can't approach it analytically.
And recognizing the context, the status of experience.
Yeah, sure.
Then that puts everything into its...
Exactly. It's all a matter of finding the actual perspective. You know, when you find the actual perspective, everything makes perfect sense.
That's interesting because Longchenpa, I've read, never advocated that type of Madhyamaka process. I don't hear that.
No. Madhyamaka is basically intellectualizing. And it's powerful within the intellectual realm. But this is this yoga is about surfing energy. It's about full energy, full subtle energy integration on every level and every dimension. It's grabbing reality and giving it a big wet kiss. It's not thinking about it or analyzing it or figuring it out or not figuring it out. It's more like jumping off a cliff than it is like sitting wondering what the cliff is.
Well, letting it reveal what it is. Just
directly, because it is what it is, and that fact does everything. Has always done everything, is always doing everything. Beyond space and time is doing everything, is everything, and here it is, right here.
It's interesting that also the Galukas seem to be somewhat wary of Dzogchen. It seems to be
well, they rightly intuit that it's beyond Buddhism. I mean, all the modern schools of the Tibetan Buddhists are basically Protestant, and what they were protesting is what they saw as the laxness of the Nyingmas, and at the core of that laxness is their adoption of Dzogchen. And then sort of after the fact and apologetically, when it had taken such root and proved to be so powerful, they kind of, grandfathered Dzogchen in as being, oh no, this is genuine Buddhism. It's Buddhism. And the teachings of this are ultimately from Buddhas and so on and so forth. It's all apologism. It's all revisionism. The fact is that Dzogchen does not depend upon Buddhism, and Buddhism does not depend upon Dzogchen. Dzogchen is reality. Dzogchen is direct engagement with reality. It is what Buddha, it's a very direct saying of what Buddha saw and tried to teach. It's a very direct presence of what Jesus saw and taught, and so on and so forth. I mean, all the prophets, all they have seen is reality, and then they do their best to teach it as best they can, and then and that gets garbled by successive, disciples and translators and all that who are doing the classic paying attention to the finger and ignoring the moon. Yeah.
I heard recently something about, it really touched me, that particle and the wave, it's not two, but the particle becomes the wave.
Right. It's not like that. That's a simple way of understanding it. What looks like a particle and what looks like a wave is one thing. And it's neither a particle or wave, or you could say both appears as particle or wave. But it's not like the particle turns into a wave or the wave turns into a particle. It's something else entirely. It's something that completely transcends particles and waves, and yet particles and waves seem to appear such as they do because of it.
So what would it relate to symbolically?
I'm sorry?
Symbolically, what would it relate to?
I'm not sure what you mean by symbolically.
Well,
I mean, the same thing happens here. This is one thing, and its nature is such that all of this is appearing the way that it does. But it is not just the sum of all of this. It is that whose nature, whose very essence is such that all of this is appearing the way that it is. But it is not limited to this. This is just appearing because it is what it is, the way that it is.
I'm very simplistically translated into light and sound.
Mm-hmm.
And a very tricky separation as it happened in between them.
Between light and sound?
Yeah.
But there's no separation at all if you look at your experience. Look very closely.
Of course there isn't. There
Yeah.
isn't. It's just where the confusion enters.
Yeah.
Where the lostness.
Yeah.
Going away so far out.
Yeah.
Via that way.
There's one thing that works one way, and it's actually quite discoverable if you look very closely at light, if you look closely at sound, if you look closely at sensation. Because, if you look at what is sensation, if you go experientially, what is sensation? It's like a tingling dynamic presence, I mean, there's no words for it, but let's just say that's roughly, very roughly, it's a tingling dynamic presence, sensation. It's a kind of a little zap sort of thing. And if you look at what sound is, when you hear sound, what is it? Well, it's a tingling dynamic presence. Sure enough, it has a different sort of a experiential texture than, let's say, sensation, and yet that difference is not absolute. It's not that the tingling dynamic presence of the one, the tingling dynamic presence of the other are wholly alien. They just have a slightly different sort of a texture to them or something. And then you look at light. What's light? Well, it's a tingling dynamic presence. It's a very high frequency tingling dynamic presence, where sensation may seem superficially to be a kind of like this, and light's like, but essentially it's the same thing. It's when you look at light, it's palpable that it's vibrating. It's like a very intense tuning fork or something that's going like that. And the same with any and all experience. That you look at thought, you look at anything. It's this dynamic sort of sparkling, tingling, very very morphing, unstable sort of a real-time energy, right? And that's true across the board. Anywhere you look and experience, you find the same quality, albeit, it seems to present with all these range of textures that we interpret as our different sense fields and so on and so forth. But it's essentially the same event, and it's all real-time.
It's like a shapeshifter, is it?
Sure. Yeah.
One substance.
Sure.
So it was more like questioning how does a sense of separation, the sense of two-ness,
Right. Insanity.
No, it's more brilliant than that. It's like the end of trajectory of total far outness. It's the brilliance of it that it could imagine to not be the source of the absolute source of trajectory, and it believes itself to be the sound.
Sure. It is unlimited, and in that unlimitedness, it can seem to be anything. It can even seem to be different than itself. It can seem to be other than itself. It can seem to be two. It can seem to be a bazillion. And yet in that seeming is not actuality. But it can seem to be that because there's no touchstone other than it. In infinity, there's no starting point that you can gauge back to keep the measure of things. See, so everything's adrift. Everything is absolutely sort of relative to itself, and since it's infinite information, all of these interpretations become viable because there's no self-evident, reliable, stable point of reference that would counter them. You see what I mean? It's not two, it's not one, but it can seem to be two, it can seem to be one, it can seem to be any which way, or some other way, and yet it isn't actually any of them. What it is inconceivable. But it is so open-ended that it can effortlessly seem to be in these various modes, and they're viable because there's so much information. It's like a Rorschach, an infinitely complex Rorschach blot. It's not like it looks like one thing or another thing. It can look like anything. It's like just sort of free association or something.
It actually is anything.
Yeah, well, it's everything, anything, sure. Yeah.
It's not just looking like it.
Yeah.
The term co-immersion ignorance, I remember reading that in Flight of the Buddha.
Uh-huh.
Are you familiar with that?
Sure.
It's almost like mind is like a prism, and it takes the primordial energy, and I don't remember the exact metaphor, but...
Well, co-emergent ignorance is again, it's dividing into Rigpa and Ma-Rigpa as if there was a division there. There isn't. It's just that knowing is of itself, and itself is so infinite that it can easily and effortlessly partialize or misknow itself.
What was the other form of Rigpa?
Rigpa, Ma-Rigpa. Ma-Rigpa is the co-emergent ignorance.
Okay.
It's like the original, we call it nescience. Original confusion, original, not recognizing.
More roughly, like Maya.
Yeah.
I mean,
and they're one and the same. You talk about it in these terminologies. It's like there's recognition and there's non-recognition, and they're two different things. It's not like that. Non-recognition is thinking there's something to recognize. Recognition is when you see there's nothing to recognize, then non-recognition cancels itself out because whatever you're recognizing is it.
Yeah.
There's no wrong and no right.
That any of this can even appear. I mean, it's just mind-blowing that even all this has happened.
Yes, this can look like anything.
Yeah.
It can look like recognizing itself. It can look like non-recognizing itself. It can look like all of this interpretation of samsara. It can look like, and yet it is always just this. And when you get that that's what this is, that's recognition. It's not a matter of, there's misrecognition of this, and then when you recognize this, that's recognition. It's not that. There's misrecognition of this, and when you recognize that this is what it is, that's recognition. It's of the same thing. It's not of something else. It's some clarity or perfection or something. This is the perfection. This inconceivable chaos is the perfection.
Well, so many of the traditional concepts wasn't perhaps intentional, but here, emptiness and nirvana, and it's easy to project it out as something other than...
Yeah. And the problem with Buddhism is that it came from a concept, from a background of philosophical presentation and philosophical debate. And so so that sort of mechanism is established there. And Dzogchen trying to establish itself within Buddhism, presents itself in terms of these assertions about itself and so on. But it's essentially just muddying the waters, because this is here. This is it. That's Dzogchen. The entirety of Dzogchen is this right here. And anything you say about it doesn't clarify.
I can't say.
Yeah, how do you say this? How do you say this? How can this be said? But you don't need to say it, because here it is.
Obviously, that's what the whole point of, I guess it's a legend, but the Buddha of the flower.
Yeah, of course. Or the famous, the Zen, the Zen koan, the disciple asks the Zen master, what is enlightenment? And the Zen master says, a tree in the garden.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not confusing. It's not murky. He's just saying, this is it. Whatever you happen to be looking at, that's what enlightenment looks like.
Yeah, so that was an attempt to counter the overly philosophical.
Yeah, sure. That's why I call this a yoga. This is not a philosophy. Yoga is about experiential engagement. It's not about thinking things or describing things or arguing about things. It's like surfing energy. And it's already happening. This is the energy. It's already being surfed as your experiential field, you may call it, or whatever you choose to call it, doesn't matter. And just let it be what it is. Stop trying to tell it what it is. Stop calling it a world and a body and a life, and it's just this. Yes. Sorry.
So what does love have to do with it?
What does love have to do with it? Love is the absolute harmony of reality with itself. You could say this is God, and God is intensely and passionately and infinitely deeply in love with itself. And all of this is that love, is the expression of that love. The planets going around the sun is love. The sun shining light is love. Gravity pulling everything in is love. The atoms all interacting with each other, dancing around each other is love. It's all love. That's what this is. That's all that's happening here. But qualifying it as love or not is unnecessary. It is this actuality, and the important thing is to recognize this reality as it is, rather than qualifying it as one way or another. Because any and all qualifications apply to it. You could say it's hate, too. You could say just as much as saying it's love, you could say it's hate. Just as much as saying it's harmony, you could say it's disharmony, it's chaos. Because all the conditions that are defined by that term are found here, too. But nonetheless, it is completely, it never departs from itself. It's absolutely inclusive of itself. This reality includes itself, every and all aspects of itself, with absolute lack of judgment, with absolute inclusiveness. And this inclusiveness and all of this intense apparent interaction is its very process of being itself, of unfolding itself. And most fundamentally and most importantly, you are this. This is you. There's no you other than this, and there's no this other than you. And which is the good news.
Thinking of to try and understand that way when the water crystals take on different forms, when there are different words or energies.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about particles.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering or curious, it feels like there's an interplay there between the particles and the
energies.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm just curious how that, I'm not clear what the question is, but what is there an
Yeah.
interplay
There's-
also?
There's endless virtual interplay of all of these energies that are interacting and morphing and seemingly, interacting on each other and influencing each other and causing each other to develop into new and other patterns that lead to new interactions endlessly and infinitely. I mean, we all experience it as the interactions of our lives, and all of matter experiences it as all the interactions that it goes through, of course. And so it's all inclusive.
So it is also this.
Yes, completely this. It's an infinite dance of energies. Inconceivably. There's no way to understand what it is or what it's doing, if anything. And yet, this is what it is, and this is what it's doing, with its vast, inconceivable range of ways that it seems to be. And no doubt it is that much again ways that it is that it doesn't seem to be, that we may not happen to be noticing or whatever. The way to practice this yoga is simply feel the presence of experience. Feel that you've always been doing nothing but feeling the presence of experience. And feel how open-ended that is, and yet how actual that is. It's not an abstraction. It's not something you can do or not do, and yet it is something that there's no limit to how profoundly and how subtly you can notice it, you can explore it, you can be with it. And you always have been and you always will be doing nothing other than that. So it's simply being with experience as it is in the fullness of its nature, which includes all of our normal ways of seeing it, but it completely transcends all of our normal ways of seeing it. It includes all sorts of astounding other implications.
Well, it has some various forms and different traditions of study. Early Buddhism and Mahayana, and even Zen, the paramitas, the perfections that are understood as being cultivated strategically or intentionally. And on the other hand, reading the side of the Buddha, there's nothing to be cultivated or etc. It is present within this.
Yeah.
All of those, what would be understood as positive qualities, would be the nature of.
Yeah, the paramitas are the perfection of various qualities that are cataloged. And this is intrinsically the perfection of any and all qualities, and beyond, and it's even para that, because it's even beyond being the perfection of those qualities. It's absolute perfection. So it's unnecessary to look at it with that sort of a complex analysis. It's unnecessary to catalog its perfections. Its perfections are, there's nothing but its perfections. Every atom is a universe of its perfections.
That's what Dzogchen means, actually.
Yes, the great perfection, exactly so. You know, greatness, and really don't underestimate the greatness of the great. It's not just the great perfection, it's the great. Really, really, really great. We have a really, really, really great show for you tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Tonight and every night.
No, this is it. This is the real thing. This is absolute. This is God. This is, you know, I mean, God is not like this little God. God is God. God is like the real thing. And it's not an abstraction. That's what God is a word for what this is. God is not something out there that this somehow. So it's all very discontinuous, and this is a great opportunity. That discontinuity is where openness reveals itself.
I have engaged since I saw you last time a kind of method, I guess you could say, where when I find myself just limited or just somehow more in this world view, I just stop for a moment and I actually start sensing the bombardment almost of everything, you know, what there is. I mean, to the minutia and to the extension of everything. Just I mean, and then the mystery of that and the deliciousness of that. And what it does is it my mind just kind of it's not normally what any other method I could say has done. Like lots of times I either go very high or in my normal life or go very low. But it's like it keeps me in a very wonderful neutral spot. It's not dissociated, but it is apart from it, but it's not dissociated, but at the same time engaged. And it's very. Well, so I engage this every once in a while. It's just this expanded, limitless kind of, and the mystery of that, you know. But to the gross level, to the planets and the this and the that, you can't understand it, we can't see it, and know what it is. To the minutia, the tiniest little things, and then I just let that be there, and it's great.
Yes, it's truly great.
Because it really makes the mind just. I can't really say what happens, but things just go on. It brings me to the most present of moments I think I've ever experienced, I guess you could say, of being here and with everything more than ever before, I guess you could say.
Yeah, good. That's a good job.
And without kind of identification or involvement in having to do something well or not well, or the script gets really diminished. It's great,
Very good. Very, very good. You've got it. You come up here. Sit over there.
But it's great, it's just I love that engagement. It's really wonderful.
Yes, truly wonderful.
There's a reason I didn't tell you. It's not broadcasting through to the. Everybody left the chat, as you can see. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. But it's good to save it.
Well, we have one viewer.
Do we?
Remember we do.
Where does it say
That's
that?
true all the time.
One viewer. Probably Helen.
Where does the restlessness come from? Like if it's ultimately at peace with itself?
No. It's completely out of balance with itself. It's a dynamic equilibrium. It's not at peace like it is ever stopping. It's continually, it's like when you walk, you're continually falling. Reality is continually falling. And so it is intrinsically absolutely dynamic. It's always sparkling, it's always dancing, it's always just showing up, sending off infinite, myriad disequilibriums. I mean, look at the entire universe is nothing other than that. It's a fantasy that, spirituality is about finding some peace, getting everything to just sort of come to a point and just sort of stop and sit here nicely. Oh, this is wild, this is crazy. It's absolutely vibrant with life. It's a life force, unstoppable life force, just irradiating out infinitely.
So there's no end?
No end, no beginning. Just pure, vibrant, transcendental energy. Nothing but. And all these forms and all these patterns that seem to present themselves are nothing other than that, this amazing, sparkling, instantaneous, transcendental energy. That's actual. Just feel that is the case. Feel the way in which that's the case. And it shows you what it is. And there's no limit to how, it's infinite. It's literally infinite. So there's no limit to how profoundly you can go into it. You can trip on it. You can, be with its nuance. And it's not just energy. It's also pure intelligence and pure meaningfulness. So it's, endlessly profound, endlessly beautiful. And it never departs from itself. So it's always absolutely complete. It's never a lack. It's never a partiality.
So what to do or where to go? If there's no right direction.
No right direction. You do what you do and you go where you go. And you can't, and even when you're doing what you do, you can't say what you're doing, really. And even when you're going where you're going, you can't say where you're going. You can't say where you are. You can never say what's happening. It's infinite. I mean, you can if you get really superficial. You say, well, we're sitting in a room talking. Well, that's kind of true, on sort of the stupidest level. But if you look at what your experiential field is actually presenting, how much does that description include all the detail? All of this is exactly the way it is. It's inconceivable. There's no way you could sum it up. There's no way you could put it into and it's changing continually. There's no time whatsoever where it's sitting still, staying the same. Every instant it's already become something else. Right? It's just the dynamism of experience is just completely infinite and completely ungraspable. You can't collapse it down into an interpretation that's coherent. I mean, we do this, we pretend to, as humans, what did you do today? Oh, I went to a talk. And that's true as far as it goes, but it doesn't go very far because it's too general. What your experience actually looks like at the moment is exactly this. And it's never happened before just like this, and it's never going to happen again just like this. And every instant that's always the case.
So no need to get rid of the sense of a separate self?
Of course not. Because that's just another nuance. That's just another way of it playing with itself. I mean, that sense of a separate self is occurring in this amazing overload of energy. So, that may be there, but it's not all that's there. When any characteristic seems to be presenting itself, in an obvious way, it's always in a context of infinite other characteristics which are wildly divergent from it. So when there's a sense of separate self, there's also a sense of other, sense of what, sense of continuum, sense of indefinability, sense of just all sorts of flavors. I mean, just all these qualities that are actually present. You can't possibly be cataloged. And they're too dynamic, and the instant they're already gone, they're already something else, right? So you just continue the dancing. You just continue to dance with it, and it looks however it looks, and it doesn't matter how it looks, because however it looks, it also looks some other way at the same time, and other than that, and other than that, and other than that, and it's not like one of them is the real thing and the other isn't.
So do you still like have a sense of a separate self, or do you still have identification with that? Or?
No, but saying that I'm as much myself as I ever was. I mean, I feel myself, but again, that's like listening to a symphony and say, yeah, I hear a violin playing an A note. Sure, that's there, but that doesn't at all sum up what's here. And I'm all of it. If it's here, I'm it. Not in any metaphysical sense, just in fact. It's like when suppose you're dreaming, and you're dreaming you're walking down the street and someone's coming up to talking to you. Where are you? Are you walking down the street? Or is that's just an apparition that's showing up that is presenting itself as being you, but you're not actually it. That's just a presentation, and the other person isn't actually not you. That's just a presentation. It's all equally present, and since it's present, it's actual, and the actuality is, of course, what you are. So all these normal human modes don't need to be cured or fixed or stopped. You don't need to stop being a neurotic self. You don't need to stop having a personality. You don't need to stop thinking. You don't need to stop feeling like you. You just see the context in which all of those apparitions are appearing, and they present themselves as just little partial flavors, little themes within a vast symphony of so much more than that. Every instant. Just see that that's the case. See what's the case.
How do you feel yourself? Did it change? Did it change the way you feel yourself?
When? What do you mean change?
Throughout.
Well, it always feels different and always feels the same. I don't know.
Does it feel more alive? Dynamically? Is it?
What context do you mean? I don't understand. You mean now as compared to yesterday, or as compared to when?
20 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Whatever that means.
Sure. Well, there was a time when I was, really identifying with ignorance. You know, I was really confused, and I was busy being that, and my experience then is just like my experience now, but I didn't actively recognize it. Because I was obsessed, I was very narcissistic, so I was obsessed with my confusion. And then as I discovered, as I came upon what this is, then I saw the context that existed in, and the basic mechanism of the personality is the same. But it's, let's say the narcissism is more spread out now. So now I'm obsessed with all of it instead of just elements that seem to be personality oriented.
And energetically, just impersonally, energetically.
It's hard to classify. Again, it was the same, but I didn't recognize it. My experience now happens on infinite levels. So, there's no way I can describe it or categorize it. And it was always like that, but I didn't know it was like that. I thought that most of that was just, but it didn't make any sense to me, and so it was confusing to me. And now it doesn't make any sense to me, but it's not confusing to me because I know there's no way, it doesn't need to make sense. It's not supposed to make sense. So I've let go of it needing to make sense, so it's no longer confusing. Confusion comes from thinking things are supposed to make sense. Confusion doesn't come because nothing makes sense. Confusion comes from expecting that it's supposed to make sense, and then you're beating yourself up because you can't find it making sense, so you get really confused. When you get that there's no sense to be made, then it stops being confusing. It's very easy.
It just is what it is. Good way to put it.
Nothing makes any sense whatsoever, and what a load off. Because then you don't have to beat yourself up for the fact that you can't make anything make any sense.
What a relief.
And any sense that we could impart to it is just projection. It's something that's made up, so it's just freedom from that.
Which is mostly what as I can see the sense of self is that trying to make sense of something. That whole quality of trying to identify or.
Well, it depends. It depends what you mean by sense of self. A large portion of that could be said.
There's sort of obsessive part.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, a feeling of I-ness is inherent. This is what has always felt like I is this presence.
Yes.
But it's not personal. It's an intrinsic aspect of this presence. This presence is I. And so that could be said to be a sense of self, and it's not confusing because it never made any sense at all. It's just a palpable sort of a flavor. I guess. I mean, it's not in the category of sense. It's more in the category of presence. And obviously, words sort of fail.
I know what you mean. I was speaking more of the quality of being the actor in the drama.
Yeah, well, quality of a worldview. The quality of a worldview, or my life, or what am I doing here, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Trying to make sense.
Right. Sure.
Trying to make it cohesive somehow.
Yeah. I can feel that dynamic pretty clearly now of that kind of urge. It's almost like a urge out of presence into this wanting to make sense.
I think a large part of that is just fundamental conditioning as children, because when you're a baby, you don't have a clue what's going on. You don't know what anything is, and your mother comes along and says, that's your breakfast. Huh? Oh, breakfast. And if you keep going forever, then you're just going to you're going to be sitting in a room and not get any attention. But as soon as you say, breakfast. You know, you go, oh, is that breakfast? That's very good, yeah, yeah. And so you get all these strokes. So you get, oh, I'm supposed to like mimic back these sounds they're making at me and pretend that I think they mean something. And that works. And so all of a sudden we're seduced into playing this game of being erudite, and oh, this is a car, this is a room, and look, there's a light, and look, oh, you're humans, and it's all just monkey see, monkey do, saying silly sounds. It doesn't, none of it means anything. But we develop a certain psychological urgency to need to do that. You know, you're supposed to play the game. You're supposed to appear to be playing the game, and everyone knows. Small children know they don't know what anything is, but they're supposed to put up a front as if they did. You know, you're supposed to like be able to say, yeah, hi, my name is such and such, and my phone number is such, and I'm doing such, and what I'm doing with my life is such and such. You know, if someone asks, hi, who are you and what are you doing? And you go, you know, that's not playing the game. You don't get the strokes for doing that.
Locked up when I'm patting
even though it's the truth. But you know, you're supposed to come up with a line of bullshit. The human mode is to bullshit. And so there's a certain subliminal urgency because we were trained in this behavior fairly early on, and we didn't have much critical faculties to realize it was just a game we were playing. We thought it mattered, it meant something, because we didn't know what anything was, of course.
I don't know if it's much use to notice that urge. It seems.
Well, it doesn't matter. I think the main thing, like my argument, as always, is notice the context in which that urge exists, and then you'll notice that the urge is very small, and the phenomena of the context is vast, and just renders it irrelevant. So then, whether that's there or not, like, who cares? So so I have an urge to be responsive, but like, so what? Doesn't add to anything, doesn't take anything away from anything. It's just a little energy tick, an energy sizzle.
Yeah.
But when you bring attention to that, I want to name everything in the room.
Good luck with that one in this room.
Very busy, very busy.
Anyway, it's just about quitting time. Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you have a lovely whatever you have.
All the time.
All the time.
That's right. Oh, my goodness.